Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are doing an on-camera review, which is not something we usually do. And we're talking about Village Big Box. That's an important part of that as well. Usually what we do is we write a script, then we record that script, then we do photos of every aspect of that script, then we edit those photos, and we put all that together and we make a video. And it takes us like 5-ish, 6-ish hours. But we got a lot more games that we want to talk about. So we're going to try to do some of these live on camera ones as well. See if it's a bit of a different dynamic. And hopefully we can talk about a few more games than we usually talk about.
So we are starting with Village Big Box, and it plays 1 to 5 players. Takes 2 players about an hour to play. And the Village Big Box has all of the expansions included. And in it, you are essentially starting off as a family. You've got a few members of the first generation. And as you go along, you are performing actions like getting horses and visiting the various, like traveling around, all kinds of things. But your first generation slowly get older. Time passes, they die away. New family members come into play as well. And you're hoping that enough family members are kind of historied or like chronicled.
You want to kill enough people that you get enough points while keeping enough other people alive that they could do some stuff, which sounds grim, but it's not that grim. Let's look at how it plays, and then we'll come back and talk about it a bit more. In Village, you start with a farmyard, a first generation of family members, and a main board filled with little cubes. Each turn, you will be taking one of those cubes from any location on the board and then performing that location's action. These include gaining wheat, adding family members, moving up the council chambers, selling goods at the market, traveling to visit other towns, sending people to church, or visiting the craft buildings where you can gain items. Many of the actions force you to place one of your family members and or spend time, which is meant to represent the passing years of the village. And every time your time goes past midnight, you have to choose one of your lowest numbered family members to die and be memorialized forever in the town chronicle, or if the place where they worked is already full, in the unmarked graves in town. The game ends once either the chronicle or the graveyard is full, and then everybody adds up points from the deals they made in the market, the villages they visited on the travel board, their family members in the church and at the town council, their leftover coins, and everyone they enshrined in the chronicle. And then the greatest family is named.
So that's how it plays, and you probably saw a lot of pictures of it. So let's start with how it looks. And this is a little bit controversial because they redid all of the art for the big box version.
Yeah, everything. It used to be much more Euro-y, much more, I don't know if Franz Clemens did it, but it was a very in that style, yeah.
Yeah, and so this one, a lot more colors. I like the colorful aspect. I think the actions are a bit clearer. It just seems more bright to me, but I think you kind of prefer the older style.
I'm torn on it. I really am torn because I like that kind of classic board game art. I am a sucker for that sort of artwork for sure. But when I first saw this, I thought, oh, I kind of wish it was the old one. And I know a lot of people did as well. I saw that in the forums. But when I played it, I just thought, I get it now. Like, it's so much cleaner. It's so much easier, especially in the work buildings.
Yeah.
Here, it's really clear. And there's like a charm in the muddledness of the older one. It's not muddled, like it's still clear enough. But the clarity of this really does help, especially when you add all of these expansions as well.
Yeah, and just one more thing, though, about the components, too, is I really like for the big box that the Chronicle comes as a separate book, which is just lovely, as opposed to being a bit on the board. And the bags and everything included are really nice as well.
They are. They're all really top quality. Yeah, and this book, so what it used to be is the bottom part of this board just had kind of a printed on book, and you put them on loosely.
Yeah.
And now it's got this, double layered, so it's nicely inset. And it's so clear how many players it's with, and just this, being able to close it. This is just a really nice touch, and I think there's a lot of these in this game as well. The player boards are double layered now. The inboard doesn't plomp on top. It sits kind of nicely off to the, if you have a big enough table,
Yes.
it connects. And even that the travel, so it used to be that the port board would go over the top. So if you want to use this travel or if you want to use the port, but now you just flip it over and then you would use the port on the other side because you can never use both at the same time anyway. So that's really nice too. And because the big selling point of this big box is that it's a big box. So it's got all the stuff in its big box. This is everything that there's ever been for Village, plus some more stuff. So inn, port, marriage is a new one,
Yeah.
as well as goal cards, as well as just a few little bits and pieces of extra stuff as well. But what do you think about all of the expansions?
I really like having it included. It adds a lot to replayability because it can feel a bit the same, but now you can choose to add 1 or you can choose to add 2. One time we added 3, and I think that was too many, but you can easily add a couple to mix things up, and they do all feel really different. For the port side, you've got to hire a captain and you've got to pre-stock your boat with the goods that you want to deliver, so there takes a little bit more forward planning. For the marriage, you go there and you hope you're going to end up in a marriage ceremony.
Yeah, there's kind of like a partner like floating about looking for people or something. I like to picture that there is like one of those old like matchmakers.
Yes.
That's trying to connect up the spinsters together. But yeah, it's kind of funny how it works mechanically.
Yeah.
But it works well.
And the bonus for that is if you get matched up, then you get bread or tools, which is an interesting new element they've added in. And if you end up in family housing, that's a way to get new members of the next generation, which is kind of neat as well. And then the inn expansion adds beer that you're brewing, and it also adds these cards that can either be immediate use cards that can come in quite handy, or actually endgame scoring cards. So give you another target to work towards.
Yeah, and I really like that as well. Another part of the expansion that I really like is just the endgame goals.
Oh, yes,
Because it differentiates. This game, it already kind of has quite a bit of replayability just inherently, but that adds just that little bit extra, like something to target towards, which I think we both really like.
Yeah.
But the end game goals are generally the ones I go for the inn as well, because it just bumps up the scoring a little bit. Like a lot of them make, the travel scoring. This scores for how many different cities you visited, and on here maybe it's 6 points for 3 cities, but if you get this, whoever it might be, you bump that up to getting like 10 points for 3 cities, which is a big bump in this game, because this is a game that, at least for us, we tend to score somewhere like 80, 90-ish points. It really depends on how many expansions you have. But with 80 points, 4 or 5 points, that's a big chunk of your points.
It can, and it's interesting when you said end game goals, because they do happen at the end, but one of the new additions for the big box is like the lifetime goals that you can get at the beginning. And so those are interesting too, because there are 2 different levels. So you can do one that is something to target towards at some point in the game. You might just have to have certain number of resources at any point, and when you have that, you score those points. But there is also the one that you can do for the end of the game, and that gives you a bit of a route to try and aim towards, because I think that is one thing that this is lacking a little bit. Is when I went into it, I kind of thought there'd be a sense of like, this is my family, and maybe they're specializing in a certain area, and that knowledge is getting passed down across the generations, and that's not it. It's a very interesting mechanic, and it's nice that it's not like being sad when people die, but the end game goals at least gives a little bit towards of like throughout the generations you are maybe working towards this one product at the end.
That was one of the tricky parts for me the first time that I played it, because when I heard about this game, I thought that there was going to be this big narrative structure of people getting older and wiser and then slowly dying out, but then being kind of like family members, and I don't know, maybe the other family members grieve them. I had this whole picture of this narrative structure, and that is not what's in this, and that makes sense. I don't know how you would have done that part of it. It would be a totally different game. So you kind of have to realize that your people, like your ones, are going to die first just because they got ones on their tummies. So you want to put them in places where you want them to die, because you want them to end up in the right parts of this here chronicle. So if Jess has killed 2 of her workers already and she's filled the 2 workspaces, that there's no more workers to be remembered. They're the only remembered ones. So now the other ones go to this sad, like, pauper's grave.
Unmarked graveyard.
And they're forgotten forever, and they don't get you any points. So I want to be able to move this guy over to, like, my farm or over to somewhere else so that they'll die there, because they die in order, because the ones are the oldest. So it's interesting, but it doesn't quite have that narrative element, but it has a really interesting mechanical element. You just got to realize that your people are kind of resources.
Yes, and what is interesting is it feels like a very simple decision on your turn, because you do just pick a cube and at a spot, and at that spot you perform that action. But there is a lot to decide with where to go. Mm-hmm. So some of it is that maybe you want a particular colored cube, so that might influence your decision. Another would be the action that you want to perform, so that would influence it. Another one would be if you want to spend time, because maybe there's a bit of a race about who can be chronicled next. So I do want my worker to get older and die and end up in the book. And another one is if you even have a worker, because if you don't have somebody to put out, then you do have to spend the cube. So you're factoring in all of this at the same time.
Yeah, because there's only one space that really gives you more workers. So workers are a very valuable resource. That's the interesting thing with the marriage board, is that it gives you a way that you're gaining new workers each turn without using the worker space. But otherwise, we spend a lot of time getting 3 extra matching cubes, because you can always spend those to do any action you want. And like you were saying, the being able to take the dual action of taking the cube initiates the action, but the cube you take is also the resource that initiates that action. Super interesting. And it's such a race game. This is a race to kill your family. This is a race to fill up that book and a race to get things done.
You want your family to be remembered, and that is signified in the chronicle, because that can be worth a lot of points for them to end up there. And part of that race too is thinking about what the other players are going to do. So some key spots are like the market action. There's only ever 1 cube there. So it could be that I wasn't going to do the market action first, but I did have goods that I could sell, and I see that Sean doesn't. In which case, maybe I'll do that first so that he doesn't get the chance to do the market action. So there is that little bit of trying to maybe block spots or anticipate what the other person's going to do.
Yeah, it's a sort of game, it's the sort of interaction I think that we generally like, where there's not any real take that.
No.
But there certainly is. I see that you definitely want this space. Jess will look at, Sean has no family members. I'm going to the family member thing 3 turns in a row. If you want a family member, you have to go there, or I'm taking them all. So there's that sort of thing a lot. Or I will even see, like, Jessica's got 2 pink cubes, but she's going to need an orange cube if she wants to travel from this place to this place. I'm not giving her that orange cube. I'm going to take that orange cube. Or the black cubes actually move your time as well. So those ones you kind of want to stick other people with as well. So, and the turns are so fast that I'm never worried, like, I don't get to do something for a while. But everything you do affects me in some way. And even if it doesn't, it's my turn again in like 30 seconds, so I'm not that worried.
Yeah, so that brings us to player count, really. And we've only played this at 2 players, so that's a bit of our caveat. And love it at 2 players because of all of that. You're able to plan enough of your actions, but you're also able to get in the way a little bit of the other player, because it's only one other player you're worried about. But I think it would play really well at more as well, and it does open it up. So the endgame triggers are the chronicle being full or the graveyard being full. And so at more players, there's more of those spaces to put people. So it would, I think, work, and it's really easy to set up. There's different cards for different player counts, depending on, what expansions you're using and how many cubes go where. So I do think it would work, but as from our experience as a 2-player game, it's great.
I totally agree. I think that this is going to play pretty much the same, because there isn't any of that really direct interaction, but there is all of that loose interaction. It's really just going to be like, if it's 40 minutes for 2 players, it's going to be 60 minutes for 3 players, 80 minutes for 4 players. But it moves so fast that I don't think you're going to mind much if there are more people.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know how much it adds. It gives you a little bit more opportunity perhaps to specialize, because obviously if there are 5 players and there's 4 spaces in one of these, and someone really does a lot of this early, they can really
That's true.
fill this up. So maybe that would be part of it, especially with the travel. That could be part of it. There also might be a bit more of a race to the market, and also to this red building that I think it's like a government building. But to these 2 buildings, there might be a little bit more of a race, and maybe even a little bit more of a competition here at the Abbey or whatever it is because whoever's the highest on here
gets 2 points each round.
Gets 2 points. So that could be a bit more of a competition as well. But I think if you play it at 2, you're never going to feel like, oh, I'm missing out on the full game. And if you play it with more, I don't think you're going to think, oh, I think this is too long, it could go quicker at 2. I think you're going to be happy no matter what count.
Yeah, and I would be interested to try it with more specifically for the marriage expansion.
Yes.
Because I think that adds an interesting element instead of adding just kind of a random wanderer. It's going to probably be another player.
That's actually a really good point. With the expansions, both the marriage and the inn, because there may be a race for those. It's not necessarily like there are cards that are always going to be better, but there are certainly games where some of these cards are going to be much better for somebody. True. So this could be more of a race. This could be more of a race. And because the placement as well, whoever is higher up on this loses out. Like the odd person doesn't get married off if there's an odd number. So that could certainly play into it, and people are going to bet more. Because if you go in a lower space, you have a better chance of getting married, but you also get worse stuff. But let's also talk about just who is this for? Who do you think are going to be the players who are really into this game?
I think this falls nicely in that mid-weight, slightly higher than mid-weight Euro category. So I think it works really well for people who have played more of the lighter medium games, like maybe a Wingspan, or are looking for the next step without it being too heavy. But also for people who play heavier games that want something a bit lighter that still has a lot of strategy and enough of a sense of decision making. I think this fits in there as well.
Yeah, this isn't one I would take home for the holidays to play with my non-gaming family, that's for sure. But it could really be an entry point for people like you say, who just want that kind of next bump up. And I think it fills kind of a slightly different niche. Like, we were thinking, what other games is this like?
Yeah.
And I can't really, a lot of times I can think of an almost one-to-one comparison, but here, not really. It's got a little bit of a feel of Istanbul, if you played Istanbul, which you'd kind of want to say is a worker placement, but it isn't quite a worker placement. And you're kind of, people are kind of a resource, and you're kind of trying to find these little routes that are going to get you points, but those routes could really differ each game depending on what other people do. So it has some of those similarities and a little bit of that same Euro-y feel, but I certainly would not say they're one-to-one. I don't think there's any other game that I would say, oh, you have that, then Village, you don't need Village. It's already covered.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Because when I was thinking about it as well, there are a few games that use time as a resource, like Zulkin, but it uses it in such a different way, and I feel like that is a bit of a more complex decision making there than here, but still an interesting element to decide what you want to do and how you want to spend your time.
But overall, I really, really like this game. I really like the original. I wanted to buy it pretty much right after we played it first. We played it at Board Game Cafe, and I wanted to buy it right away, but then I saw that this was coming out, and I thought, you know what, I'll wait, because the expansions to the original are very hard to find. And I'm glad that I did this. It's lovely. It goes in the box so nicely. All of the bits are there. Everything is laid out so perfectly. They've put so much thought into this. And the art is going to be a little bit of a hiccup for some folks, and some folks just might want there to be more narrative in it. But I think if those two aren't going to be a bar for you, it's a really great game. This is one we're going to be playing a lot.
Yes, yeah, I really like the quickness of the turns, but still enough depth in the decision making. And I think the replayability is so big with the expansion. So that's why if you don't have any Village and you think you might like it, the big box does come with everything, and that really does add a lot. I'm always so excited to play it because I'm like, ooh, now what if I try it again with these two combinations? And we've played all of the combinations, and they've all felt very different.
Yeah, they do. I would say don't play with all of them at once, though. It's too much. It's too much. We tried it, and we just felt like, oh boy, this is a lot going on. So I would say, always bring in one or two, pretty much, because it adds that little bit.
Yeah.
But I would say just bring in one or two every time.
And that's it. Those are our thoughts on Village Big Box. Have you played it? If you've played it or you're interested in playing it, please do put that in the comments. Please, as usual, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for another game.